quiet hallways of St. Michael's Hospital were eerily lit by the clinical buzz of fluorescent lights. As a night nurse, I was used to the eerie silence that fell over the medical center in the early hours of the morning. It was the graveyard shift. I had no idea that this evening would reveal a story that would push the bounds of reality and drag me into the realm of the paranormal. The night started off like any other, checking on patients, giving prescriptions, and making my way through the maze-like passageways. I heard a murmured chat as I finished my rounds. The quiet conversation caught my attention as it seemed like it was happening right within the deserted hallways. My footsteps scarcely felt on the shiny floor as I followed the otherworldly murmurs. I followed the voices down to the basement, which wasn't often used during the night shift. There was something about the weight of a secret in the cellar, making the air feel heavier. I found an ancient storage room, hidden in a forgotten corner, thanks to the murmurs. The door creaked open, showing a room replete with abandoned medical equipment and dirty cartons. The whispers became louder and more distinct, as if there were an invisible energy in the air. "He's here, the phantom surgeon." A shiver went through my body. Hospital employees used to refer to a strange person who was supposed to stalk the hallways and perform unearthly surgery on unsuspecting patients as the phantom surgeon in local legends. Many people wrote it off as a ghost story, or a fiction meant to infuse mystery into the ordinary routine of a hospital. With my senses keenly tuned in, I looked around the room. The murmurs guided me to an ancient filing cabinet that appeared to have had no use for many years. I pulled out the first drawer, and a plethora of patient records fell out. Patients who had undergone mysterious procedures. The records included operations carried out by an unidentified physician, surgeries that were not approved by the institution, and seemingly miraculous results. The phantom surgeon seemed to have supernatural abilities that went beyond what was possible for humans. I was drawn to a specific file containing a patient called Emily Turner, who was admitted for a standard appendectomy. On the other hand, the surgical notes provided a different image. The hospital staff had failed to detect Emily's oncoming heart failure, but the phantom surgeon had saved her life with a difficult cardiac surgery. The more I examined the files, the more obvious the pattern was. When traditional medicine seemed to fail, the phantom surgeon seemed to materialize, intervening with supernatural skill to preserve lives. However, the issue persisted. Who was this enigmatic person, and why did they conduct their business in secrecy? I went to the seasoned employees of the hospital, determined to find out the truth. There were whispers and sidelong stares whenever the phantom surgeon was mentioned, although it appeared that everyone had heard the murmurs. Very few people were brave enough to admit that the healer was a supernatural being. A single nurse, Margaret, an old woman, whispered about her experience with the phantom surgeon. Margaret had worked a very busy night years before, seeing a patient's condition gradually decline. When it looked like there was no hope left, a ghostly person dressed in surgical scrubs materialized. Taking command, the phantom surgeon performed a life-saving procedure with a level of skill that was beyond human comprehension. The medical personnel was left in shock and bewilderment when the phantom surgeon vanished into the shadows in the same enigmatic manner as they had appeared. The rumors of the phantom surgeon's origins increased, along with their mystique. Some thought the surgeon was a ghost with unresolved business, while others saw it as a competent outsider who broke into the hospital at critical junctures. A mystery of the otherworldly continued to envelop the truth. I kept up my midnight pursuits, motivated by a combination of curiosity and terror, but always being aware of the whispers that directed me. The phantom surgeon evolved into a phantom figure in the hospital, a night watchman who stepped in when medical technology failed. In the evening, as I was going about my business, the emergency department was suddenly overrun with people. Despite the hospital staff's best efforts, the situation swiftly descended into controlled pandemonium. The murmurs came again in the midst of the panic, directing me toward the operation rooms. I went into a poorly lit operating room where a group of medical professionals were trying desperately to stabilize a really sick patient. The room was filled with the deafening beep of the cardiac monitor, warning of impending death. The whispers became louder and pointed out to me the figure in the corner, a ghostly apparition dressed in hospital scrubs. The phantom surgeon moved on, breaching the laws of the living without saying a word. The space appeared to bend around them, as though recognizing the otherworldly energy present. The surgeons halted, their wide-eyed looks expressing their surprise. An eerie quiet descended upon the chamber as the phantom surgeon took command. Their hands navigated the intricacies of the surgery with an uncanny ease, their precision surpassing human ability. The heart monitors beeping slowed down as everyone let out a collective breath. The phantom surgeon turned to face me as the crisis subsided and our eyes locked for the first time. There was a subtle recognition and a depth of familiarity in the glance. There was a startled quiet in the operation suite as they disappeared into the shadows without saying anything. After first being reluctant to accept the phantom surgeon's existence, the medical staff was forced to face the paranormal entity that was among them. Wildfire rumors caused the once disregarded legend to gain unquestionable credibility. Was presented with a social conundrum. Was the phantom surgeon a boon or a sign of something more sinister? The murmurs guided me through the nights, bringing me face to face with the phantom surgeon at the most unlikely times. Every appearance challenged reason, pushing the boundaries of what is known and bringing a supernatural element into the field of contemporary medicine. Confronted with the indisputable facts, the hospital administration called a meeting to discuss the phantom surgeon issue. Some contended that the enigmatic healer ought to be welcomed as a benefit, a kind of guardian angel keeping an eye on the facility. Some, fearing the unknown, demanded action to drive the otherworldly entity from their midst. I was at the epicenter of the rising dissatisfaction at the hospital, caught between acceptance and mistrust. Even the most logical minds were uneasy with the mysterious aura surrounding the phantom surgeon's operations, despite their miraculous nature. The rumors brought me to the hospital archives, a quiet place, one night while I patrolled the hallways. The space was crammed with old filing cabinets and dirty shelves that held the institution's archives. It appeared that the phantom surgeon was connected to the history of the hospital. His name sprang up as I thumbed through the files. Dr. Alexander Thurston, a well-known surgeon who had vanished unexplainably decades before. Rumors of unethical research and an almost obsession-like search for medical knowledge tarnished Dr. Thurston's legacy. Though Dr. Thurston's contentious past had been long since forgotten by the hospital management, rumors persisted that suggested otherwise. It appeared as though Dr. Thurston had ventured into the paranormal in his quest for medical knowledge, taking on the appearance of the phantom surgeon who prowled the hospital's hallways. Disclosure left more questions than it did answers. Had Dr. Thurston risen above the grave to carry on his work in secret, or was he a ghost trapped by an unfulfilled destiny? The murmurs led me to an unfathomable truth that was now entwined with Dr. Thurston's legacy. A sequence of unexplainable events occurred while the hospital struggled to come to terms with the identity of the phantom surgeon. Patients reported seeing weird visions during their interactions with the supernatural healer, and electronic gadgets malfunctioned in her presence. The inexplicable caused the hospital's once firm faith in the empirical to disintegrate. One fateful night, the tension peaked as the phantom surgeon was called in to assist with an emergency surgery. With the patient's life in jeopardy, the surgical team hesitantly agreed to accept the alien healer's assistance, divided between desperation and skepticism. There was a tangible energy in the operating room as the procedure went on. The phantom surgeon seemed to be affecting the very fabric of reality as the lights flickered and the room's temperature changed. After the patient's vitals stabilized, the procedure was met with both amazement and trepidation. Following the incident, the hospital's management had to make a crucial choice. The phantom surgeon, a ghostly force that defied logic, had grown to be an essential member of the medical staff. When split, the hospital personnel now had to decide whether to embrace the paranormal healer or drive the inexplicable out of their ranks. The murmurs led me to the hospital rooftop, where the line between the living from the supernatural appeared to blur, while the hospital struggled with its uncertain future. Before me, outlined against the city lights, was the phantom surgeon. The ghostly voice said, "I was once Dr. Alexander Thurston, with the weight of a lifetime's work in it. My goal was to discover the mysteries of life and death and to push the limits of medicine. By doing this, I was bonded to this hospital and felt obligated to step in as a protector when science failed." The once mysterious legacy of Dr. Thurston suddenly materialized before me as the phantom surgeon, a force that transcended death in its pursuit of healing. "You hold the key to the hospital's future," Dr. Thurston added. "Make the decision to either welcome or reject the unknown, but keep in mind that there is far more wiggle room than you may realize between science and the paranormal." After saying those remarks, the phantom surgeon disappeared into the darkness, leaving me by alone on the rooftop, debating the importance of the decision the hospital had to make. Now torn between amazement and terror, the hospital had to make a choice that would determine its future. Once a rumor in the shadows, the phantom surgeon was now an incontrovertible fact. It remained to be seen if the hospital would accept the otherworldly force that was among them or reject the inexplicable and cling to the security of the familiar. The whispers subsided, leaving an uncomfortable silence in their wake as the institution stood on the brink of a new era. Beyond the realm of the paranormal, the phantom surgeon mythology had been ingrained in contemporary folklore surrounding St. Michael's Hospital. The future of the hospital now depended on how closely science could draw the line between the unknown and science, a line that grew more hazy with every murmur at night. The night spread its dark tendrils as I forced open the enormous glass doors of the New Haven Medical Research Center. My footsteps echoed along the sterile hallways, the only sound in the quiet facility. My late-night shifts as a lab assistant were nothing new, but this one would lead me into a terrifying realm of mystery and disclose a story that stretched the bounds of scientific understanding. The research center was well known for its cutting-edge investigations that stretched the limits of medical understanding in an endeavor to comprehend how the human body functions. Tonight's task was to manage a cutting-edge experiment that had the potential to revolutionize organ transplantation. Dr. Harrison, the principal investigator, has been working very hard to create a procedure that would increase the compatibility of organ donors and recipients. The experiment was scheduled to start at midnight, when everyone outside the research center went to bed and no one knew about the groundbreaking work being done inside. It was shrouded in secrecy. When I first entered the lab, there was a subtle tension in the air that appeared to come from the very instruments that were all about me. It was a mixture of exhilaration and unease. Dr. Harrison, a serious-looking middle-aged man, nodded to greet me. His eyes conveyed the gravity of the next task with a mixture of enthusiasm and fatigue. The lab technicians meticulously went about assembling the state-of-the-art equipment that would enable Dr. Harrison to actualize his vision. The center of the experiment was in a room next to the lab, which was a secret area that only a few people could enter. Dr. Harrison guided me to the door, his eyes resting on the guard station at the entryway. I felt a shiver run down my spine as the heavy door opened, foreshadowing the mystery that lay inside. On the walls of the sterile experimental chamber were covered in monitors and other diagnostic apparatus. A huge, clear chamber with a complex contraption that appeared to conflate the supernatural and science stood in the center. Inside the room hung a human heart, covered in a gel-like material that pulsed with an unearthly light. With a reverent tone, Dr. Harrison said, "This is the culmination of years of research, the project for enhanced organ compatibility. The medical field is about to undergo a revolution." The chamber's heart beat with a rhythm that seemed to be outside the bounds of reality. It was evidence of Dr. Harrison's unwavering drive for advancement, a journey that had brought him to the brink of uncertainty. The experiment started at the stroke of midnight. The chamber sprang to life, the heart inside starting to beat in time with the spinning gear. The room's atmosphere changed, filled with an unearthly force that caused the hairs on the back of my neck to stand on edge. Everything went according to plan in the experiment, and the heart responded to the improvements in a way that was inexplicable. Dr. Harrison watched the proceedings with a mixture of pride and amazement as he was overcome with the success of his brainchild. Data on the monitors suggested that the organ and its artificial surroundings were more compatible than had ever been the case. But just as the experiment was coming to an end, a faint unease descended upon the room. An unexplainable uneasiness appeared to nibble at the boundaries of my mind as the air seemed to thicken. It appeared as though a shadowy power was watching our efforts and overshadowing the scientific victory. A surprise happened as the clock reached the wee hours of the morning. The chamber's heart, which had previously been beating with life, started to beat in an unharmonious rhythm, a pattern that wasn't consistent with what was expected. Excitement gave way to fear as Dr. Harrison studied the monitors, trying to make sense of the mystery that was being revealed to us. There was a faint hum that was unsettling and sent shivers down my spine. Once a shining example of development, the experiment suddenly took on a sinister aspect that defied logic. The improved heartbeat with a rhythm that suggested a link to the unknown, as though it was sensitive to forces outside our understanding. Fascinated and nervous at the same time, Dr. Harrison started emergency procedures to end the experiment. The machinery in the chamber whirred to a halt, and the unease that had descended upon the place started to fade. A weight of an unspoken mystery hung on the heart, which was suddenly motionless. Once a stronghold of scientific accomplishment, the research institution now held a disturbing mystery that went beyond empirical comprehension. Dr. Harrison called a conference with the study team to analyze what had happened, since he was struggling to explain the unexpected phenomena. There was a general feeling of dread as the team assembled in the lab. The monitor showed data that defied accepted medical knowledge, an organ that seemed to be susceptible to forces outside the purview of human understanding. The quiet discussions among the researchers suggested a shared apprehension, a recognition that the experiment had transcended the known. The research center was full of rumors in the days that followed. Dr. Harrison examined the vast amount of data gathered throughout the trial, driven by an unwavering search for solutions. Beyond the walls of the research center, conversations centered around the augmented heart, which was now a symbol of both mystery and victory. I was lured to the heart's chamber, which had turned into a hub for the unexplained, as a lab assistant trapped in the maelstrom of uncertainty. The experiment had been accompanied by an eerie hum that echoed inside the walls, a force beyond human comprehension. There was a slight disturbance in the air late one night when I stood in front of the chamber. Seemingly inactive, the augmented heart started to pulse with a faint glow that matched the rhythm of the unusual experiment. There was a shift in the air in the room, a charge of energy that suggested there was someone there. Looking into the room, I saw what appeared to be a shadow moving over its clear surface, a transient form that emerged in the glow of the enlarged heart. There it was, the faint, but definitely visible silhouette that made my spine tingle. It was as though the experiment had unlocked a door to a realm beyond human comprehension. The figure inside the chamber moved in time with the heartbeat that resounded throughout the space, giving the impression that it was reaching out. Words that went beyond spoken language were murmured by a distant but resonant voice. The eerie hum and the murmurs appeared to blend together to create an eerie symphony of the unknown. And triggered by curiosity as much as dread, I stepped up to the chamber. With its features hidden by the brightness of the enlarged heart, the entity inside held out a ghostly hand, perhaps inviting me to come closer. I felt as though the room's air were rippling, and I was floating. A strange scene materialized as I entered the chamber's brightness, and my surroundings became hazy. I was in a place where space and time blended together in a ballad of otherworldly beauty, defying the laws of reality. The shape, clearer now, took shape in front of me. It was something that appeared to represent the mystery of the strengthened heart. The figure's voice resounded through the bizarre scene. Seek the truth. The sounds of a bygone era echo in the heart. Discover the secrets that your reality hides behind the surface. The realization shocked me back to reality. Once contained inside the confines of scientific investigation, the experiment has evolved into a portal to a world beyond our current understanding. I was encouraged to venture into the unknown regions of the mystery by the person inside the chamber, a ghostly guide to the mysteries that lie underneath. Broken pieces of long-forgotten knowledge accompanied me as I walked through the bizarre terrain. The answer to solving the problems beyond the realm of empirical comprehension lay within the expanded heart, a bridge between universes. The figure led me toward a reality that beckoned from the shadows and was now a traveling companion across the unknown. The research team speculated about the lab assistant who had entered the chamber once they were back in the research center. Dr. Harrison concentrated on analyzing the data gathered during the experiment since he was so eager to find the cause of the abnormality. They wrote off the murmurs that had reverberated around the lab as a result of the unusual occurrences. The upgraded heart seemed to be inert as the days went by, hanging there in its chamber. The experiment's troubling outcomes were consigned to the annals of scientific history, and the research facility seemed to revert to its usual state. However, a truth lingered, an enigma that begged to be solved. Within the maze of the unknown, unfamiliar buzz echoed through the research center. Late one night, while it slept in ignorance, the improved heart beat with fresh energy after appearing to be inactive for days. The room seemed to call to people who were sensitive to the secrets that lie beyond the surface of reality because it was filled with a ghostly radiance. The figure in the room, a protector of the unknown, reached out a ghostly hand to the lab assistant who had entered the bizarre world. The radiance from the heart grew stronger, illuminating the area around the research center and beyond. The whispers reverberated through the silent hallways, now a menacing symphony. The lab assistant saw something appear as she moved closer to the chamber. A portal to the lost world that beat in time with the upgraded organ. The figure within issued a last invitation, and the lab assistant crossed the threshold because of his ravenous curiosity. The augmented heart beat with an unearthly rhythm, and the research center, once a stronghold of science, fell silent. The figure inside the chamber, a ghostly guide to the mysteries beyond the reach of empirical comprehension, disappeared into the void. The lab assistant set off on a trek through the bizarre terrain, a place that defied human vision. Now that she was seeking the truth, the whispers reverberated through the research center's hallways, now mingled with the augmented heart's pulse and evoking a mystery that went beyond the realm of science. Once a triumph of scientific advancement, the experiment had become a doorway to an unknown world that beckoned to anyone who dared to explore its depths and discover its secrets. Unaware of what was happening, the research center watched in silence as this mystery that went beyond the known and into the unknown realm of the paranormal took place. The augmented heart pumped with an alien force as the night entwined itself about the research complex, creating shadows that danced along the walls. The whispers continued, a symphony of the unknown that echoed through the quiet hallways, creating a haunting story that hung in the air like an unsolved mystery. The lobby of Mercy General Hospital was strangely silent when I entered, with the fluorescent lights overhead flickering menacingly. There was an overwhelming silence, and the sterile smell of antiseptic lingered in the air. The hospital was empty, and it was past visiting hours, yet I had an odd feeling that I wasn't alone. My grandma had been hospitalized a few days prior for an unexpected illness, so I went to see how she was doing. Although the physicians reassured us that it was nothing severe, we were all concerned about her fragile health. I felt a shiver go down my spine as I got closer to the registration counter. The middle-aged woman at reception looked up at me and tried a grin. She inquired, her voice resonating across the deserted lobby. "How can I help you?" "I'm come to see Eleanor Green, my grandmother." "She's in room 304, I answered, glancing down the empty hallways. With a nod, the receptionist glanced at a monitor. "Floor 3, room 304. Even though visiting hours are over, I'll let you in because you're family. Proceed to the elevator on the left." After saying thank you, I made my way to the elevator. The eerie atmosphere that persisted at the hospital seemed to be echoed by the slow hum of its machines. I couldn't get rid of the feeling that someone or something was observing me when the doors closed. The third floor was faintly lighted, occasionally punctuated by the distant beep of monitors and the quiet hum of machinery. The corridor, with its numbered doors, like an infinite maze that stretched out in front of me. It was room 304 at the very end. The clean white walls were shadowed in an eerie way by the flickering lights overhead. After a brief pause, I reached for the doorknob. Despite the windows being completely closed, a chilly breeze touched my skin as soon as I entered the room. With her eyes closed, my grandma laid in bed, and the only sound in the room was the heart monitor's steady beeping. I murmured, "Grams," relieved to see her soundly asleep. I took a seat next to her and started telling her about what had happened that day. There was a palpable tension in the room, as though the air itself was holding its breath. A slight whisper of words appeared to linger in the air as I spoke, drawing my attention to a quiet sound. I thought at first that it was just my imagination, but the murmurs continued, becoming clearer and louder. A distant voice mumbled, "Eleanor," and it gave me the chills. The voice sounded eerily familiar, like a long-forgotten memory straining to break free. I looked around the room, almost expecting to see someone else, but my grandma and I were the only ones present. There was an unearthly force in the air, and the room felt colder. The murmurs persisted and started to make sense now. The voice begged, "Help me," and I understood it was coming from the walls. I felt as though the hospital's architecture itself was speaking to me, and realized that Mercy General's walls were hiding a sinister truth. Beyond its pristine exterior and antiseptic odor, the hospital had a past. I needed to find out the truth. I went to Mercy General the following morning, filled with curiosity and resolve. In the glaring light of day, the hospital, suddenly humming with activity, felt like a different place. On a facade of normalcy replaced the eerie mood as nurses scurried along the corridors and patients were moved in and out of rooms. In an attempt to uncover any undiscovered information that would shed light on the enigmatic whispers, I made the decision to begin my inquiry in the hospital archives. Tucked away in an obscure area of the building, the archives were a labyrinth of old file cabinets and dusty shelving. I started to feel uneasy as I thumbed through old records. I learned that Mercy General Hospital had been there for more than a century, having seen many lives go through its doors and the advancement of medical science. But hidden away in the archives were accounts of a string of decades-old mysterious fatalities. One thing the victims had in common was that they had visited room 304 prior to their deaths. The room had developed a seedy reputation as a result of staff rumors about unexplained malevolence clinging to its walls and weird happenings. I dug deeper into the history of the institution, determined to solve the riddle. Before long, I came upon the heartbreaking story of Margaret Hartley, a nurse. Nurse Hartley had worked at Mercy General in the 1950s and gained a reputation for providing extraordinary care and compassion. But when she was charged with medical malpractice in the death of a young patient, her life took a terrible turn. Nurse Hartley was singled out by the hospital management and had her nursing license revoked in an attempt to preserve the institution's good name. She committed suicide in room 304. Her connection between Nurse Hartley and the enigmatic murmurs became more evident. The more I dug, her ghost appeared to be haunting the walls, looking for atonement for a crime she did not commit. Now the question was, how could I assist her in finding serenity? Equipped with this acquired understanding, I made the decision to question hospital employees about room 304's eerie past. But when I got closer to the front desk, I was greeted with cold looks and disparaging comments. The hospital appeared committed to erasing its troubled history. Not to be deterred, I went looking for the oldest employees, thinking they would know something about Nurse Hartley's past. After a while, I discovered an elderly janitor who had spent decades working at Mercy General. When I described Nurse Hartley, there was a flicker of recognition in his aged eyes. His voice rasping low, "You're digging into things best left alone." The ghost of Nurse Hartley still prowls these corridors, looking for justice, but exercise caution. Tampering with the past might have disastrous results. And his menacing remarks just strengthened my resolve. I had to figure out how to talk to Nurse Hartley and get her the tranquility she was looking for. I found Dr. Emily Carter, a local paranormal investigator who specialized in bridging the gap between the living and the dead, through my search. I told my experience to Dr. Carter, a middle-aged woman with piercing blue eyes, and she listened closely. She was the ideal ally in my search for answers because of her knowledge of the paranormal. Her fingers tapped the table thoughtfully. "I've encountered spirits trapped between worlds before," she said. "However, speaking with them is not simple. In order to communicate with the ghost of Nurse Hartley, we'll need to hold a séance in room 304 under the correct circumstances." That evening, Dr. Carter and I went inside room 304 equipped with candles, incense, and a resolve to find out what was really going on. The area had an electric vibe to it, as though there was a concealed force pulsing through the walls. There was an unsettling atmosphere, created by the dancing shadows the flickering candles made on the antiseptic walls. The room felt tense as soon as Dr. Carter started the séance. Anticipation thickened the air, and the temperature plummeted. Around us, whispers began to reverberate, becoming more frantic and loud. There was a cool breeze brushing over my skin, and there was an unearthly energy in the air. Dr. Carter yelled Nurse Hartley in an unyielding voice. "Identify yourself if you are present. Our goal is to assist you in finding serenity." A ghostly force appeared to come alive in the room. The murmurs became a somber voice, and a dark figure appeared in front of us. At the foot of the bed, Nurse Hartley stood in her worn uniform, her eyes full of longing and pain. She muttered, "I seek justice," and the room echoed with her voice. "I was wrongly accused, and my spirit cannot rest until the truth is revealed." Dr. Carter gave a nod, her eyes unblinking. "Nurse Hartley will assist you, but the specifics of what transpired must be known. Tell us about yourself." A terrifying story emerged as Nurse Hartley started to describe the circumstances that had led to her untimely demise. Despite her best efforts, the young patient she had cared for had passed away from an uncommon and unexpected illness. The hospital had damaged Nurse Hartley's image by blaming her for the death in an attempt to avert publicity. The room took on a powerful mixture of grief and rage as the truth came to light. With her ghostly form flitting in and out of existence, Nurse Hartley's spirit begged for justice. It became evident that the only way to give her serenity was to reveal the history of the hospital. Equipped with this fresh understanding, I took on the enormous challenge of exposing the truth to everyone. I began by assembling information from the archives to create a dossier outlining the false charges made against Nurse Hartley, but the hospital was unwilling to allow its secrets to become public. As I continued my investigation, odd things started to happen. Whispers followed me everywhere I went, and shadows lurked at the edges of my eyesight. It appeared as though the hospital was resisting the disclosure of its troubled past. I was working late one evening at my apartment when I got a scary call. The other person cautioned me to stop looking into the past and threatened to harm me if I didn't stop. The voice was quiet. Fear gripped my chest tighter, but I pressed on because I was determined to give Nurse Hartley justice. With the proof in hand, I spoke with Sarah Thompson, a local investigative journalist, renowned for her unwavering search for the truth. I published Nurse Hartley's account and the documentation of the hospital's cover-up in the hopes that Mercy General's dark side would be revealed by the media's influence. Captivated by the narrative, Sarah consented to look into it more. The hospital retaliated with a determined effort to preserve its reputation as her pieces gained popularity. The eerie symphony of phantom voices reverberated through the hallways, growing from soft whispers to a cacophony of voices. Threats from an unknown source advised me to give up on seeking justice. The hospital's management denied any misconduct, portraying Nurse Hartley as a deranged and discredited former worker. Conflict between the truth and lies intensified, and I felt as though Mercy General's walls were closing in on me. I was drawn to room 304 one night while I was strolling through the hospital's dimly illuminated hallways. The whispers grew louder, and the air took on an eerie intensity that pushed me to face the worst mysteries of the institution. I felt shivers run down my spine as soon as I pulled open the door to room 304. The spectral form of Nurse Hartley stood in front of me, her eyes beseeching for justice. The walls seemed to whisper the years of agony and suffering that had been kept hidden, and the room itself seemed to pulse with a spectral energy. Nurse Hartley's voice reverberated throughout the room. "You have to reveal the truth. The hospital cannot hide its sins any longer." I kept working with Sarah because I was determined to see justice done, giving her the proof she needed to reveal the hospital's murky background. The once haunting murmurs have evolved into a call to action for justice that motivates us to continue on our mission. The hospital's facade started to fall apart when word spread about Sarah's investigative pieces across the country. Former employees came up with their personal stories of carelessness and cover-ups. The public's clamor for accountability from the formerly unaccountable organization was overwhelming. I had one final glimpse of Nurse Hartley's spirit in the middle of the mayhem. As she talked, her voice full of thanks, the room appeared to sparkle with a soft radiance. She said, "Thank you for helping me find peace." As her image gradually vanished, "The truth has set me free." With its terrible past now public knowledge, the hospital was subject to both legal action and public indignation. The noises of accountability and reform took the place of the whispers that had once haunted its hallways. Mercy General, once a picture of recovery, was now a warning about what happens when the past is forgotten. Following the disclosures, I stood outside room 304 for the final time, considering the path that had brought me to justice. The hospital, which was now under investigation, served as a symbol of how truth can withstand the veil of deceit. A gentle breeze caressed my cheek as I turned to go, bearing a whisper that seemed to be Nurse Hartley's last words of gratitude as her soul sank to peace. Mercy General's once haunted walls now stood as a solemn testament to justice's victory over evil.